I was hoping to film outside today, but the weather didn't really cooperate, and it's cold and wet, so we're bringing it inside and doing the next few steps in here. Hi, Scouter Peter here. Just wanted to take a look at the recent developments with the hiking staff here. I sanded it down using several grades of sandpaper until it was nice and smooth, and you can see that I've got all the bark off and the sanding of the roughness down on the entire length of the staff. If you take a look at it, you can see that I didn't do a perfect job with the sanding and the debarking, and that's made the surface kind of rough, and it gives it an interesting coloring, especially after it's been oiled. Right. After the sanding was all done and I was satisfied with the smoothness, overall smoothness, I gave it several layers of oil. The first layer of oil that I put on was a linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, that was diluted with some turpentine. Actually, it wasn't turpentine. They don't make turpentine anymore, so it was a solvent that was used to dilute paint, thin paint, wash up from paint. Adding a little bit of that to the linseed oil made it a little thinner, which allows the linseed oil to penetrate deeper into the wood. So I gave it one layer of that, and then another layer of just plain ordinary linseed oil, letting each coat dry thoroughly. Finally, I added a layer of something called tung oil, which is a wood finishing oil, and that coats the surface, gives it a nice shine, brings out the highlights in the wood, and also gives it a kind of a tacky but not unpleasant feel, a little bit sticky feel to the surface of it that is going to make it easier to grab the stick. And then I let that dry thoroughly as well, 24 hours, and it's now pretty well dry and ready for the next steps. After finishing the oiling of the stick, the next thing I did was add the top and the bottom tips. I like to have a tip on the top and on the bottom for several reasons, but that's entirely up to you. I would, however, strongly suggest that you put a tip on the bottom of your staff, and you have two choices. One is that you can use a rubberized tip. These can be gotten at any hardware store. They're useful for, they're in the section that has the tips that go on the bottom of chairs so that they don't damage floors or scratch floors. I think this is the 1-inch diameter tip that goes on, and it happened to very easily and quickly fit right on the end of the bottom end of my walking stick. I've chosen to have the narrower end as the bottom end of my walking stick, but you can do it either way. It goes on, and it goes on well enough that I don't think it's going to come off, but if you were worried about it, you could always put either a drop of glue on it or wrap a couple of layers of hockey tape on the inside to have it grip better. Okay? You could also use a brass or a copper tip on the end. I don't like that as much because you have to have the diameter much more accurate if you do that with this kind of a tip. If it's a little bit too big, you can squeeze it over with, and it actually helps to hold it on better. Also, I find when this strikes the ground, it's a lot more comfortable than when something hard like copper or brass strikes the ground. So on this side, it fit perfectly. On my other side, and what might be the case with your stick, it was much too big, and so I had to take a belt sander to it and carefully narrow down. I had to take about 1/4 inch off it, down to the point where I could slide this particular tip onto it. If you don't have a belt sander, you could always cut the cut a groove around the outside with your knife, or the saw rather, and then use your knife to carefully cut off the extra wood so that you've got the right diameter. But if you do have a belt sander, it's a lot easier. One of the things that I did before I actually did the oiling, or the final oiling of the stick, was on the bottom of the stick I cut a small notch. You can see that here, and it's there to use if I want to reach in with my staff and pull a pot off the fire or hang a pot off the fire. Of course, if you do that, you have to be careful that you don't end up melting the rubber tip in the process. But it's handy to have a little hook here. I was thinking about putting a hook on the end, but I couldn't figure out how to do it in a way that was practical. Now it's time to add the rope handle so that you've got a more comfortable and solid grip. In order to do that, the first thing you need to do is to figure out where the top and the bottom of your handle is going to span on the stick. And the way to do that is hold the stick in your hand, put your arms at your side, and have your arm go horizontal to the ground and grip the stick. That grip point should be about 5 centimeters or so lower than the point where you're going to have the top of the grip. And what I've done is I've just taken this point, gone up slightly, and made a mark on here with a pencil so that I know where to start my rope grip when I'm wrapping it around. The rope that I've chosen, I thought with this one, I usually go with browns and stuff like that. I thought with this one I'd go with something a little more festive, so I picked a nice bright orange. Kind of matches in with the color of the stick as well, so I think that'll look good. Here's an example of a hiking stick that I've been using for a while, and you can see the rope grip on it. You can also see that there's a handle, which means that when you wrap it, you need to have an amount of rope sticking out of the top and an amount of rope sticking out of the bottom so that you can tie them together. I'm going to, on the new stick, I'm also going to add several pieces hanging down here as well, and I'll show you how to do that as we wrap it. This is a different kind of rope. It's heavier and thicker. You can use whatever kind of rope you want. I just thought paracord would be a nice one to use for this new one. Okay, so this is the point where I made my pencil mark, and it's going to be the top of my grip when I hold on to it. I want to leave a good 10 to 20 centimeters above there. This is going to be useful, you'll see, and it's going to be part of the hand grip that goes around, or the wrist grip that goes around. Then I need to calculate how far down I want my grip to go. So I can put my hand on the top of the grip, bring it down a little bit more, and then give it a little bit more on the bottom, another, say, 3 or 4 centimeters. So that brings it down to about here. Okay? So the grip is going to run from here to here, which is a nice size grip. The next thing I'm going to do is at that point at the bottom, I'm going to hold it to the stick, and I'm going to bring this back up, loop it back up to the top, and when I get to this point here, hold them all in place, and then I'm going to start my wrapping at this point, and I want to start by going over the other one. And as I wrap it around, there's going to be a lot of string to wrap around, so I can gather some up in my hands, make it a little easier. But let's get it started at least here, and we'll start by bringing it around, and I'm going to wrap it rather tightly, and starting definitely at the point. Now, if you find, I'm not doing it with this one here, but if you find that the rope is sliding too easily on your stick, then one of the things you can do, and something I did with this other one here, is you can put black tape or some kind of tape underneath it that'll help it to grip better. Electrical tape doesn't do it, it actually makes it worse. You need hockey tape in order to do that. So if you wrap hockey tape around it first, that'll stick to the wood, and then the rope will stick to that. But with the tung oil, that shouldn't be necessary anymore. So we're going to start by wrapping this around, and as I said, it needs to go around rather tightly, not super tightly, but tightly enough that it sticks to the wood, and it needs to be done close. So you need to make sure, and you can help it along a little bit. You need to make sure that each strand is right up against the last strand. Once you have a few strands on, one of the things you can do to make life a little easier is, instead of wrapping the string around, twist or rotate the stick, but you still have to make sure that it's nice and tight all the way around, and that each strand is right up against the other one. So that makes it a little easier. And you just keep going right to the end. Actually, a little before the end. We're going to stop a little before the end because I just thought we're going to add one more little feature to this. As you continue to wrap downwards, try to make sure that your downward loop, the one that over here, is going straight down. You don't want it to end up spiraling around with your wrapping. It shouldn't go over here and get wrapped into that. It should try to go straight down as well. Now you can see we're getting close to the end. There's just this much left here, and I'm going to say stop with about a centimeter or two left because we're going to add something here. I'm going to take another piece of rope. This is just a piece of scrap paracord. It can be any color, it can be any length because you're going to trim it afterwards. And what you're going to do is you're going to, if you want to do this, you don't have to, is you're going to lay it underneath one of the strands near the end. And you want to do it in a way so that it's just wrapped down underneath it, just so that it stays in place like that. Okay, and then you just keep wrapping. There'll be a few more wraps that you need to do until you get to the very end. Now you want to make sure that this the rope is only wrapped around one or two. You could, I guess, do two. Might work better. I don't know. One or two strands of the wrapping, but it's still free to flop around. And you keep wrapping until you get right to the end. And now is the moment of truth. You wrap, and I'm only have a little tiny bit of this bottom loop extending through the bottom. And now at the very end, I'm going to take the end of the rope that I've been wrapping, and I'm going to put it through that little bottom loop. Okay, pull it all the way through until it's like that, and then I'm going to take the other end and I'm going to pull it tight. And this might take a little bit of work because I've wrapped it nice and tight. Okay, so I've had to move it and put it against the floor and wrap it, and actually there's a problem here I don't like because it's not tight enough. pull it as tight as you can on this side here, and if you do that, it will pull the end of the cord in to here very tightly, and then as a result it'll lock it all into place. And you just want to make sure that the bottom part here is nice and tight before you do that, so that it doesn't become unraveled. Okay, so again, you might even end up using a pair of pliers to do this, but you probably don't need to. That's not going anywhere. Okay, and I still have this, and I have this at the top, and what I can eventually do is cut them to size and turn them into some kind of a loop, a wrist loop here. And I still also will have these down here, which I'll show you what are for later on. Okay. These two strands that fall off the bottom here that you've added, you don't have to add them. I just think it would be a nice thing to have, maybe cut them to about this length or so, and you can use them to add any kind of a decoration on it. I wouldn't use feathers because on a hiking stick in the rain and that sort of thing, the feathers will end up going, but maybe some beads or some other kind of carvings or something like that. I like the idea of maybe using them and having beads and putting one bead on for every hike and one bead on for every camp that you've put on. You could also have different colored beads to represent some landmark skills, major skills or accomplishments that you've done, like sleeping in a shelter or starting a bow drill fire or something like that. And you can add that onto here using different kinds of beads and other kinds of ornamental things that you might want to add. Next step is to tie the two ends together here, and in order to do that I've first used a sheet bend and then just added an overhand knot to each of the parts that are sticking out, and that's mostly to make sure that the sheet bend doesn't come undone while you're walking. I've given myself enough loop so that I can wrap it around my wrist once and still hold on to the onto the rope part of the staff. Okay, so it goes on like that. Again, that's a matter of preference for you. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the extra pieces here and burn the ends so that it doesn't fray. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is add a measurement scale or a ruler to the side of the hiking stick. I'm going to start off in centimeters, but I want to add inches as well, because one of the most useful things that the measurement part of the stick can be used for is with tracking animals, and a lot of that information is in American books and is in inches, so I want to have both centimeters and inches on here. I also want to make sure that the measurement is from the very tip of the stick. So I've got the ruler or the tape measure down here so that it's at the tip of the stick, and of course because of that, first 5 centimeters or so are difficult to read. So I'm going to add a mark at every 5 centimeters, and then I'm going to put some smaller marks in between after number 5 in order to get the details of each individual centimeter. I'm going to go for up to 50 centimeters, which is up here off the screen, and that would be half a meter then, and that would be an easy way to measure meters as well. Okay, so I'm using an acrylic pen, but acrylic paint marker, but you can also just use I would use a fine Sharpie marker A thicker Sharpie marker might be a little bit too bold for this, but a fine Sharpie marker would do the trick as well, and it could be black or red or whatever you want to use, but I'm using a blue acrylic one, and we'll see how that works on the oiled surface. Going to put that down here, and I know that the centimeter part is marking is here, so that's that one, and that's that one, and that's that one, so that's 15, 20, 25, just to mark that off as half a meter. Okay, now I'm going to go back and use the brown one to mark the individual, and I'm going to start at the 5 centimeter mark because the section from 5 to 0 is obscured by the tip on it. So you can see from this that I have every 5 centimeters marked in blue, and then the individual centimeters marked in brown. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it over to the other side of the stick and do the same thing in inches. So for the inches side, I went up to 18 inches, which is half a yard. One of the things that I always do with most of my hiking sticks is to add 2 elastic bands on it. The purpose of the elastic bands is to measure distances, help you keep track of distances. Very, very useful in tracking animals, but also for other things as well. If you want to mark a particular distance for something or a particular measurement for something, you just can slide the elastic to wherever you might want it, and then that'll hold the place of the number that you're trying to remember. Again, if you're using the hook to take a pot off the fire, you want to be conscious of the fact that your elastic bands are there and you don't want them to end up melting on you. Last basic thing that I would do with the hiking stick at this point would be to add the little button compass onto the top. That's why I like these plastic or rubber tips, because the compass just fits nicely in the little groove at the top, and I like to have the compass on top of the hiking stick when I'm walking. It's not the best compass, but it gives you a general idea if you're going north, south, east, or west. Once it's glued on, it's in a good position for you to see it. This stick is perhaps a little too high to easily see the compass at the top. You have to keep that in mind. In the future, I may want to make the stick a little bit shorter so that I don't have to get up on my tiptoes in order to see the compass, but it will do the trick. Now that's the most basic parts of the hiking stick all done, and anything else is kind of an embellishment on top of that, right? So there's lots of things you can do. You can use the markers to put designs on it. You can carve something in, but if you carve something in, just remember carving is pretty final, and also you would have to re-oil it afterwards because you're carving down below the oil. But you can use a marker or an acrylic marker to put any kind of a pattern on it. You can put your initials on it. You can use Ranger bands, which is just old cut up bicycle tubes, to put a section on here. You can put a ferro rod in. You can use some tape to put in a little safety kit, like something with band-aids for first aid, or with a needle, or something to remove ticks. They all can go underneath an elastic band or a Ranger band or some tape on the stick.